University as an educational field training specialist. And I think this perspective is hugely valuable at this time. In addition, Rania is co-founder of Edu Enterprise, which is a non-profit organization registered in the States, and has also launched the Educational Leadership Lab, which applies design thinking principles. And she has also been involved in the coaching space with an educational leadership coaching e-platform called Rushed. Unsurprisingly, Rania is recipient of a number of awards, including the Sheikh Fazil Ben Kazim Award for Educational Research in 2019 and the ICSI JPCC 2020 Innovation Award. And she's published research in numerous peer-reviewed journals and books. She volunteers as well. She's, as I said, a remarkable person. So she volunteers with several institutions, including the Ambassador of Qatar, Qatar Red Crescent, the Reading Club, Cajalis, and she is a co-founder of Women Ed MENA. So not a small CV. Rania, we look forward to hearing from you, and particularly hearing your perspective on current challenges faced by education students.
Thank you for this remarkable opportunity and this introduction. If you allow me, you'll go through the panelists, right?
Abdelaziz, if you can allow Rania to screen share, I think.
Professor Rania, you can share now.
I think it's already shared.
Okay, it's coming. Yes, good. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. This is an amazing opportunity, especially at this time. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Abdelaziz, for this remarkable introduction and helping us with the questions that you raised, Robin. So this is brilliant because that would help a lot. Going through the outlines that I will share with you today, please keep in mind the questions that and the technique that Robin had shared with you. So keep your pencil and paper. I'm going to go quickly through education leadership principles, and we'll share with you some insights from first-year students and from field training experiences. We're also going to have some lessons learned, and I don't call them recommendations. Think about what, why, and how. The first thing that I would like to start with is about education leadership principles, how I see it from my experiences and from my studies and research. Education leadership includes formal and informal roles. So we need to keep that in mind. You might agree, disagree, we will discuss about that. Education leadership is a process, not an event. And when we're talking about education leadership, it's developing the whole person. It's not only about academic achievement or about passing a specific test. When we're talking about education leadership, it's embedded within higher education. So it's every single discipline, either you're teaching education or you're talking about business, whatever your discipline, you will find education leadership as part of that with the principles that we're mentioning. Why am I saying this? Because leadership has a variety or various definitions according to the number of people that try to define it. For me, I find leadership as part of influencing others. So if we review higher education institutes' key missions, we will find them talking about quality teaching, research and inquiry, and we will find also community service. When we're talking about quality teaching, definitely you will influence your students and your colleagues. Research inquiry, definitely by disseminating your findings and paving the way for future research. Community service is very clear that you're influencing not only your students, but the whole community. And that had been obviously seen in the ranking for the universities and higher institutions. When I've been introduced to speak at this conference, I was clicking with the word transformation because we're using different terms coming from the West, and we need to be very careful about defining those words, especially when translating them to our own culture and context. So are we talking about transformational or transformative? Are we talking only about setting directions, redesigning the organization, or are we talking about promoting equity and justice in education? For me, I will combine both of them. So when we're using the terms, we need to be very careful about that and the implication within the practices. I was very lucky during my journey in higher education because I started teaching first-year students. A curriculum was designed in Qatar University based on this book that you see within the slides about keys to college success. And I will speak about it in a minute. I was also able to supervise postgraduate students and developing their skills as researchers, besides supervising my students in their practicum experience while they go and teach in schools. I also worked in various publications that I tried to connect the research with my practices and how to find innovative solutions, which we will be presenting during this session. Why first-year students? That's a question everyone might start thinking. Why are we, separating it from other students? Many universities are struggling with first-year students because of the definition of first-year student. It's not the students that had been only enrolled recently. It applies for all the students that have limited number of hours during their study. So that might apply for them for 3 or 4 years because they're still changing their disciplines and they are not meeting the requirement to go to the second year. And that's causing a lot of problem to higher education institutes because they're not having number of students to graduate, the facilities, infrastructure, different challenges. So what happened, what we were doing with those students before this pandemic and during this pandemic? We need to make sure that we're providing support for those students from parents. This is very important, and that would help us within designing and leading, kind of initiatives. And we also need to make sure of the relationship with peers, the institution facilities. We need to equip those students not only with knowledge and skill dispositions, not only for their academic success, but also for their personal growth, strengthening their relationship at 3 levels. We're talking about person level, community, and society. We tried not only to teach them those skills, we applied coaching techniques. So we would help those students to reflect on their own practices and how to develop that. So let's think about what's happening now during the pandemic. We need to go to the schooling system. Now, many countries didn't continue their years, and the students had graduated from year 12 or whatever system that they're applying. They will be applying for the universities or colleges. So we have too many questions to ask. Did they complete the requirements to be ready for those universities or not? The second thing is about their enrollment process. Are we ready? How are we going to accept them? IELTS had stopped their examinations, for example, national standards, the standardized test, etc. And when we accept them, how are we going to provide induction program for them? Are we ready with the resources, telling them, especially most of those resources had been prepared to be offline. They need to be physically in the campus. So are we starting fall 2020 online, or they will start joining the campus, and how we're supporting them? We found that many students did not have devices to be ready for online teaching. Some of them had financial issues because of the, their families and things that they're facing. And most important, it's not only about academic, it's about their well-being. They were afraid, their mental health and their physical and their well-being expectations, especially. Some of them were afraid of coronavirus and affecting their families, what things that they had been facing. So this is the first experience I'm talking about. I'm not giving ready solutions because each context is different, but there are lots of things to be explored and talked about, from customizing the curriculum and the courses that we're having and the way that we're providing those kind of supports. I will take you from first year students to the last year students while we start helping them to be prepared for the market and to be prepared for the workplace that they would be ready for. Some universities will call it internship, others will call it practicum, field training, despite of the terminology that we're using. I'm talking about the students that will be joining the practices within the field. So we started thinking, are we going to have a virtual internship, or what kind of solutions that we will start with them? What kind of things that we'll provide them, especially that most of the schools had stopped. We were lucky in Qatar that online teaching continued, but still our students were not able to go to continue teaching on those schools. And that apply also for business, for media, for medical disciplines. What's happening with those field training courses? So we started thinking about re-identifying the core competencies. What are the main things that we want our students really to gain and to focus and to achieve? What kind of supporting system? I'm repeating the same thing with the first students. So are we supporting them financially, because some of them were not able to have the devices to connect with their teachers and to apply some of the practical things, because we asked them to record kind of sessions about how they might be implementing teaching strategies. We also applied some of the coaching techniques to support them, because each of the students were facing totally different situation than the other one. And we try to have innovative solutions. For example, can you record this lesson, because I'm teaching in College of Education? Can you record it? Can you video? Can you have it audio? What kind of things that you are able to do, and what kind of platforms that we might use? The most important thing within field training courses, we need to avoid just linking them to the market, because the current market is changing, and we need to open the space for future thinking. So if we were thinking about students applying in normal classrooms, we might not have normal classrooms anymore. If we were talking about business, those disciplines might disappear before those students graduate. So we need to be very innovative within our solutions. What we did within one of our studies, we explored the need of female students in one of the universities and many universities in Saudi Arabia. And we found that one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is communicating with instructors. This study was before the pandemic. So I want you just to imagine what kind of challenges now they are facing during the pandemic and after. So what we should do and start focusing within our decisions, how to help those students, especially that they were saying and talking about, they are also facing challenges within critical thinking. So we designed a program based on design thinking approach, which is linking everything to the human-centered design, helping them to develop their communication skills, critical thinking, career readiness, social responsibility, social and religious responsibility, and personal responsibility. When we're talking about higher education and education, we need to remember that we need to support our teachers' well-being. We need to support the admin team. It's not only the students, it's not only the first year student or the undergraduate or the postgraduate, because we have many studies telling us that postgraduate students feel depressed in normal cases. So what about now, what they're facing within the pandemic or after? So lessons learned, and I will summarize with this. Yesterday and today, I think that we need to emphasize the importance of building resilient structure and systems. We suffer from higher education institutes that there's long process to for accreditation and accepting new programs and new ways of applying systems. So we need to be more flexible and more resilient about that. We also, when we talk about education leadership, we need to be aware of sharing leadership. And there is a difference from my perspective and many researchers, that there's a difference between sharing and distributing. Distributing as if someone is giving you the task, but sharing means that everyone is on board and involved. And that's very linked to the sharing agency, including faculty members, admins, students, parents, stakeholders. Anyone can help within this process. I said also about coaching. So whenever that we're implementing that, either with colleagues, with students, that would help and enhance the quality of the learning. When we're talking about learning, it's not only about lifelong. Now we need to have life-wide. And this is a term that had been used in WISE conference within the last 2 days. We need to give them and equip them with experiences more than just the academic and the syllabus that we provide them with. We need to make sure that the strategies that we're teaching is respecting or taking care of the adult learning theories and self-determination, helping the students also to be self-learners, because they will face different situations that we are not aware of, like one that we're facing. Develop research cultures that helping humans, and create different systems, because everyone in higher education start asking you, how am I going to assess this a new way of implementing or a new way of learning? So we might have something called communication of competence, and those kind of ideas that we're hearing from many different scholars. We need also to encourage innovative solutions. I would highly recommend that we start looking into design thinking, because it simply says start thinking with the user, with the student, the teacher, the faculty, not for them. So step back from telling them or theoretically telling them what to do, and go and see their needs and what exactly can be implemented. I would highly recommend if everyone can explore what Michael Fullan had written his book in the last couple of years about Nouns Leadership, which is mainly to talk about the 3 habits of joy, determination, adaptability, and culture-based accountability. Because Robin had mentioned at the beginning, every context differs, and we don't have ready-made solutions. We don't have one magic answer for everything. So we need to be aware of the culture, and we need to start from there. I hope that this quick insight had given us some of the ideas. There are lots to look about in the studies and in the experiences, but it starts from you, from your own experience and how you're trying to find the insights, how you're trying to find the answers within the situation that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. What a very powerful presentation. Just wonderful. It is so special to hear somebody speak so eloquently about what human-centered education really looks like, and this principle of design thinking, that we are designing with, not for, and empowerment of those for whom, with whom the design is happening. So I'm really hearing very strongly from you that your approach is to innovate alongside and with your students. And that is something that we discussed yesterday as a really key prerequisite for coping with the complexity that we are currently coping with. We cannot understand for, we have to innovate with. So I would like to invite the audience. We have 10 minutes now just to pose a couple of questions to Rania. I'm going to just pull up again the questions so that we are able to just consider them. And if you could please post these in the chat. If you could post these in the chat group, and we will pick up from the chat group what your specific questions for Rania are. Again, please share with us how your own experience resonates with what you've heard, and some of the local challenges that you might perceive or imagine might be challenging for the suggested approach that she has given. And then just any general questions. We really would like as much interaction as possible. And so I'm going to give a few minutes, just let's keep a silence for 20 seconds, half a minute, for you to post your questions, and then we'll look for those and pose them. Okay, so please continue to post if you have anything, just so that you're aware I'm very comfortable with silence. Silence is a powerful, powerful thing for prompting thinking. So please don't feel kind of abandoned when there are moments of silence. It's to help to enable thinking. So Rania, if it is okay, I hope that you will be all right with this. I will pose the questions because sometimes it just eats into time when we kind of shifting around between trying to unmute people, etc. And so there is a question here from, oh, I've lost it now. There is a question from go.
I'm Khadija.
Sana,
From
well,
Khadija.
from Sana Barka
From
too.
Sana, but yes.
Yeah. Who has asked, could you please clarify what you mean by life-wide when we talk again? So you did mention briefly, but perhaps just some examples of how students might be exposed to life-wide learning, which is a powerful concept.
Yeah, it's a new term had been used and introduced. When we usually say lifelong learners, we're talking about the length, but now we're talking about the type of the information. It's not only related to the academic disciplines. We want those students to be equipped with more than that, with skills and knowledge that's related to their real life and how they can transfer it, how they can utilize it in a different way. So when you think about that, either if you're working in schools or higher education, you might start thinking of what kind of knowledge, what kind of experiences my students need to have, and they will need more or in-depth information about it, as if that we're widening that. So this is something very important, because sometimes we only focus on math or in specific disciplines and the syllabus that we're having in higher education, but we forgot how to link it with practical experiences. And we have seen within the pandemic, especially in many cases, how they can, for example, take care of the elder within their families, what kind of things that they need to know and to do during the pandemic for their health and therefore their contributions. Usually, we don't talk about health in, within our syllabus. We just focus on the student, how to achieve and how to gain this information to pass the test and to graduate, nothing else. So this is my my focus. Now we need to expand that. We need to focus more about the other things that really our students need to be careful. Today we have the pandemic. Future, we don't know what other things that we might face.
Fantastic. So it's really it's actively encouraging diversity thinking and exposure to multiple diverse environments, and this concept of cross-sectoral understanding, that we don't only know what happens in our silo, but we start to see beyond those horizons and learn lessons, so that we have a richer approach to our work. Thank you. So Khadija Laksumi asks, how can institutions and faculties support and encourage a shared leadership culture amongst staff members? This was a question from yesterday as well. So
that's a long discussion. This is very important, especially that first of all, we have two dimensions. We have our willingness to accept those kind of new roles and volunteering within influencing others. And we have also the formal positions allowing us and providing space for that. But if we want to make it short and simple, first of all, we need to provide safe and positive environment for people to try and to discuss and, you know, to start suggesting new ideas. Because sometimes institutions focus on mistakes. So if you did this mistake, you're not allowed to do anything more. No, we need to support them to try and to help them within those techniques. Another thing is providing a challenging environment. So we have within higher institutions, sometimes we have a ranking for the most innovative universities, because they help and they support new ideas from their teams and any team. When we're talking any team member, when we're talking about either students, faculty, admin. So we don't limit it only to the same group. And sometimes we notice that education leaders have the same people consulting them all at the same time. But we need to hear other voices, and we need to have other experiences, especially that when we're talking about humanizing, we need to hear the voices of the students, the parents, because it's a journey. We can't just plan for them. They need to be involved within according to their needs and the insights that we're hearing from them.
Thank you. So first the will, and then actively cultivating spaces of trust and safety is the best start. Very important. Thank you. So Betisam Taibi, please excuse me my pronunciation if it's problematic, asks or mentions that you mentioned that some students don't have access to the internet and devices. Could you perhaps share how you've managed to deal with that difficulty?
There was a lot of collaboration with charities and different organizations. So they started collecting funds for those students and highlighting. Also, the faculty members themselves, they tried to find different ways to help those students. So you don't have all the sessions only at one time dedicated, because you might have one device in the family and that might cause issues for different people. But when you have flexibility within the schedule that you're facing. So the first answer is we had collaborated with different organizations within the country, especially that charity, and collecting for those students. The other thing is about the flexibility with understanding and utilizing the features of the platforms that we're using. So it's not only live event, you can record it, you can send them different ways of learning and responding to you. And this could be also customized at higher levels, but that was a very urgent stage. Like during the pandemic, you're trying to find the best solutions at that stage.
Thank you. Flexibility again. From Ayman Raife, do you think that distance education should be maintained following the pandemic?
For me, I would utilize any opportunity. But when we're talking about distance education, we need to differentiate between teaching online and using those devices, because sometimes we just apply the syllabus as it is without modifying and having the online teaching strategies and what kind of things that we need to apply for the content itself. So I think we had seen lots of opportunities and positiveness in the positive aspects within implementing those kind of online teaching and learning. But we need to have the credibility of that. We need also to make sure of the quality and how did we customize our teaching and learning practices so that it would help both the learner and the institutions to achieve the goals.
Fantastic, thank you. Two final questions, they're both really interesting ones. So from Ikram Esahir, he asks if you could please elaborate on how your institution has made use of design thinking. Have you used it as an iterative process? And if so, how have you managed to strike a balance with deadline constraints?
Okay, now I'm talking about two different institutions. Besides working in Qatar University, I also co-founded IDI Enterprise. It's a non-profit organization. Everything that we do is based on design thinking. So the initiatives that you had mentioned, for example, Education Leadership Lab, we teach the people in a very practical way who participate on those labs how to implement design thinking tools to find solutions and practical solutions with prototyping and trying this till they implement it. We also apply that within the study that I shared with you previously, that when we did the study, we identified the core competencies for the female students, and then we developed a program based on design thinking, and we helped those students to think like a designer, like how they can utilize those resources. For me, I try to embed that or include that within the practices with my students. So as I told you, yes, I give them the syllabus, but I also apply coaching techniques and I help them with the tools to help them to think about kind of challenges that they face and how we can find solutions with that. I don't tell them that this is labeled as design thinking because they will might be confused with other terminology within the syllabus. But the beauty of utilizing the tools within their practices is more important than just giving a very intensive theoretical part about that.
Beautiful, thank you very much. And then the last question that we can take today is also, I think, just really an important one, because it speaks again to our human approach and to really recognizing that we are working with people. And so the question from Kamal Aithaj is, based on your experience, how can we deal with students who have emotional issues during this pandemic period as one of their key issues of need? So perhaps some practical examples of how you have managed to really address some of the difficult emotional issues your students face. We know that once amygdala is triggered, it's very hard to learn. And this is such an important area, social and emotional learning, and it's not just for basic education, it is across the spectrum as human beings.
That's very important. But let me go back to the question about design thinking. When we apply those tools, we simplify them, so we don't worry about the timing, because it's based on a specific pace that would help them and would cope with the timing that we have. Now, going to the specific examples, personally, I faced many situations with my students. So, for example, I had a pregnant student that she had her baby before finalizing the course. Some of them had family issues, were about to be divorced. Others had, they had lost one of their family members because of Corona. So there are different ways, and each one of the students, you need to deal with them according to their abilities and to the situation that you're having. Coaching techniques doesn't give ready solutions. You just help them to reflect on their own situation and how they can, and I'm not going to say balance like being equal, but how to utilize the resources that they're having. How can I help them? So they need to identify the things that they will focus on. Being flexible, being supportive, understanding, and empathetic, that's very important. Sometimes just listening to them, giving them the space to speak and to share with you those ideas, that would be helpful. And then they come back to you and say, thank you for supporting. I'm trying to manage. I'm trying to find new ways. Because having this distance between them and you're not aware of all the details that they're facing within families, you are not there to give them ready solutions once again. But the way that you're understanding and showing them flexibility and resilience, this is very important, that they themselves will try to find solutions and they will be surprised at what they achieve. That's why we're saying that give them the space and you will be surprised of how they unleash their potentials and the levels that they had achieved, and they will be very proud. That's going back to lifelong learners and to life-wide learners.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rania. I think, again, just the power of active listening, how when we listen well, it unlocks potential and empowers. It's not up to us to solve, it's to create thinking spaces for people to solve for themselves. So thank you so much for a really, really wonderful presentation. And yeah, hoping that you can remain with us so that we can further engage in a little conversation later on. Sure. So we'll move now. Thanks, Rania. We'll move now to our second presenter. I just need to get my slides moving. There we go. So I had the privilege of trapping Dr. Al-Qamar on the phone for about an hour the other night and having a really, really remarkable conversation with him. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce him to you today, and I'm looking forward to what he has to share with us. So he is currently based in Morocco, where he's the Director of Academic Affairs and the Co-Director of Development and International Relationships at the HEM Business School. He also holds the role of Chairman of the Association of African Business Schools, so I expect him to come and visit me when he's next in South Africa. He's a member of the steering committee of the European Foundation for Management Development, as well as a member of the steering committee of the Principles of Responsible Management Education. He holds a PhD in Management Sciences from Angers University in France, an MSCIT from Regis University in the USA, an MBA from Phoenix University in the USA, and a BA in Economics from the University Hassan II in Morocco. And he has overall experience of more than 28 years in both the higher education field and the information management industry. And he really has a professional interest that is based on understanding the homeostasis of stability and change that's required in order to succeed in the implementation of enterprise resource planning. So organizational reboot, if you like. So yes, I'm going to hand over to you, and we look forward to hearing your observations, your thoughts on the topic at hand. And please, again, bear in mind those questions. We'll have another question period at the end of this session.